Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished delegates, committee members, Monsieur Kamal. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Zaid Fakir. I'm the co-chair of the Standing Committee. I have my fellow co-chair here.
Good afternoon. I'm Sahir's co-chair for the Standing Committee on Finance. My name is Traude Wolanski from Austria.
So good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the side event of the Standing Committee on Finance. For this side event, we particularly got a bigger room. That did not mean that you should be sitting at the back of the room and leaving the chairs in front empty. I know that we do have a reputation in the Standing Committee of being a mean bunch of people. We don't bite regularly, and occasionally we bite, but not regularly. So please come fill up the front seats if you. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this side event on the committee's deliverables for COP27, and we hope that we can give you a good overview of our work plan for this year and provide us also with the opportunity to discuss linkages with the relevant processes within and outside the UNFCCC. The Standing Committee of Finance assists the COP with respect to the financial mechanism and undertakes technical work on climate finance in line with the mandated functions, and these are namely improving the coherence and coordination and the delivery of climate finance, rationalization of the financial mechanism, mobilization of financial resources, and the MRV of support to developing country parties. The SCF conducts its various activities to fulfill these functions and develops technical findings and recommendations for the COP. To help parties make informed decisions relating to climate finance in the UNFCCC process, and in terms of COP26, the SCF launched two flagship reports. The first report being the fourth biannual assessment, and for the first time, the inaugural Needs Determination Report. The Needs Determination Report, or the first inaugural report, was produced under the convention that provides a bottom-up assessment of the costed needs of developing countries and in their expressed communications and to the UNFCCC. So basically, we looked at all the reporting that is done by yourselves at the various reports from national communications, NDCs, and tried to do an assessment of the needs in that. So have a look at that report. There's some interesting things there. One of the glaring things that comes out is the fact that much of the needs represented are not costed. And that's something that you need to be thinking about. And in terms of the needs determination report, it has found that the costed needs can range anything from 5 trillion to 11 trillion. So there's some interesting data there, but also interesting work for you to continue doing on that. In terms of the fourth BA, it's found that there's around an average of over 775 billion in climate finance flows. Interesting data in there. It also shows that there's a positive trajectory in the global financing flows between the biennium 2017 and 2018. And taken together, these two reports show the financial flows are nowhere commensurate with the required financial needs as assessed in the needs report. Now, I will not read it like the way the Secretariat told me to read it, but rather say we have limited time, and not that we don't have the time to do this for you, to present all these important findings. In terms of the work, we would invite you to visit the SCF website, which now displays interactive graphs on the pertinent pages of the two reports. Both the biannual assessment and needs determination report were a result of an extensive stakeholder engagement. And for those that have participated, you would note that it was also done during a period of time of COVID and lockdown. So there was quite a number of engagements done virtually, but also one has seen a tremendous amount of interest and a number of people that's participating in that process. The SCF has several deliverables for this year. At this side event, we will cover some of them, namely the 5th biannual assessment, the $100 billion progress report, the work on climate finance definitions, and Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement. Please note also that there will be time set aside for questions and answers after the second panel, and therefore, so please stay with us till that end and note down your questions and comments. It's just really to keep you in the room. So, but at any point, if you feel that something is not clear, just jump in. With that, I'm going to hand over to Frodo for you to continue with the session.
Thank you, Sahir. In the first panel, we would like to give you an overview of the work streams of the SCF. And to do this, we have invited some of the co-facilitators that have kindly taken over the coordination of the work on the different products. We have with us currently Ali Vakas, Gabriela Blatter, and Bianca Moldovian. We will probably also be joined by Vicky or by Diane Blacklane a little later. To start with, I would like to invite Gabriela to present the work on the progress report on the 100 billion. Gabriela.
Thank you very much, Traude, and good lunchtime, everyone. Great that you're actually spending your lunchtime with us. I hope you'll not regret it afterwards. I have the pleasure to co-facilitate the preparation of the report, the 100 billion progress report, together with Richard Muyungi, who's not yet here in Bonn, but he will arrive next week. In Glasgow, COP26 requested the SCF to prepare a report in 2020 on the progress towards achieving the goal of mobilizing jointly $100 billion per year to address the needs of developing countries in the context of meaningful mitigation action and transparency on implementation, taking into account the Climate Delivery Plan and other relevant reports. And the report will be considered at COP27. To initiate the work on the report, the committee agreed at SCF 27 the general outline of the report, including its scope, to take into account available information, both backward and forward-looking, up to the year 2025 from a variety of sources. The report will provide an overview of the quantitative and qualitative information across the three aspects of the goal: the mobilization of climate finance flows, addressing the needs of developing countries, and the context of meaningful mitigation, action, and transparency on implementation. A zero-order draft of the report will be considered at the upcoming SCF meeting, which takes place right after the SBs, also here in Bonn. A call for input was issued in April, with a deadline at the end of July. With its call for input, we are particularly looking for evidence on the following issues. One, the backward-looking and forward-looking information on progress towards achieving the goal of mobilizing jointly $100 billion per year by 2020 through to 2025. Information on addressing the needs of developing countries, and information on meaningful mitigation actions and transparency of implementation. If there's actors in the room that have not done so, please respond to this call for input. We would greatly appreciate it. In order to enhance the comprehensive climate finance data availability for this key report, the SEF will organize a technical webinar with data providers and other relevant stakeholders from both developed and developing countries in conjunction with a webinar on the 5th biennial assessment and overview of climate finance flows. And again, there we encourage you, please participate in the webinar. We rely very much on the input you provide to us. And as Zahir pointed out before, all the products from the SEF are a result of an enhanced stakeholder engagement. So please reach out to us. We don't bite, and we're very interested to receive your information. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. As you were so very efficient in presenting the work that you're doing, coordinating, are there any questions of a technical nature, questions for clarification to Gabriela at this point? Yes, please, Mateusz, is it? Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello, Richard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, this is great.
You recognize it.
So, if the chair can allow me to thank you very much for the very elaborate report, which reflects indeed what we have been doing for the couple of weeks. And apologies for not being able to be around, but I'll be joining you next week. So, Gabriela, thank you very much. And co-chairs, I think this is the reflection of what we have been doing. And I wish you all the best in the deliberations, but I'll be joining you next week, as I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's very good to know. Over to you, Mateusz.
Thank you very much, and good to see you, Richard, as well on the screen. Thank you, Gabby, for your explanation. I would just ask you to further elaborate on the idea of multiple sources of information in this report, because we understand that we have many external reports on the delivery of the 100 billion goal, and that they build from different methodological perspectives and assumptions. So how do you intend to approach them with that in mind, and what would be the possible outcome of this assessment from different sources? Thank you.
Thank you for this question, Mateusz. Yes, and we're very open for any source, so please let us know. We also don't have all the reports on our radar. So the SCF also deliberated on that at its last meeting, and the understanding was we also have a lot of SCF products, right, which already aggregate other information which is out there. For example, the biennial assessments that we have already produced, and also the needs determination report. So the SCF clearly stated that those reports will be a key input into the 100 billion progress report, since there we already went through a part of that exercise of looking at the methodologies, isolating the technical data, and so on. So that will certainly build upon that experience and the data we already have in these aggregate products. But then we also recognize that, for example, for the needs part, the needs determination report was published, and NDCs, for example, have been updated and so on, and we want to take into account also what has happened since the last NDR. So I think that's an important consideration, and I can't tell you yet what the outcome of the progress report will be, but the idea is that we will probably also work with ranges, again, when we talk about quantitative information, to show the variety of methodologies which are out there. And on the qualitative side, I don't know yet how we will capture that. But yeah, we know there's some reports who also disagree on some facts and so on, and the committee will have to consider that on a technical level.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, for the answer. there is room for more questions at the end of the side event, as Sahir already said. So now I'll hand over to Ali to present the work on 21C of the Paris Agreement. Ali, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me convey that I'm really pleased to report today on the work which we are doing on SCF work plan for 2022 and our key deliverables for COP27. And me and my colleague Kevin Adams, who is also in the room from United States, we are co-facilitating SCF's work related to the Article 21C of the Paris Agreement. At Glasgow, Standing Committee on Finance was tasked with two important mandates related to advancing work on 21C from CMA and COP respectively. Article 21C, as you all know, is one of the three goals of the Paris Agreement that sets out the goal of making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. Specifically, if we talk about the mandates which we received from COP and CMA, then first in Glasgow, CMA 3 invited parties, operating entities of the financial mechanism, international financial institutions and other stakeholders in financial sector to submit views regarding ways to achieve 21C, including options for approaches and guidelines for implementation by 30th of April, and requested SCF to produce a synthesis report of the submissions received and presented to for consideration at CMA4. From COP26, we also received a mandate to undertake further work on mapping of available information relevant to 21C of Paris Agreement, including its reference to Article 9, with a view to provide inputs for consideration of the COP27. So there are two mandates, one from CMA and one from COP. The CMA mandate is pretty straightforward. It's a synthesis of the submissions. And the COP mandate is to further the work on mapping related to Article 21C. As far as the progress so far on these two mandates, which me and Kevin are co-facilitating, we had a fruitful discussion in our first SCF meeting. And to date, on the synthesis of submissions, we have received so far only 9 submissions. And and we have prepared a synthesis report, a zero draft of which will be discussed in the SCF meeting in coming week. And as far as the mapping of information is concerned, the COP mandate, in the last meeting, SCF actually agreed on the approach that it will build on, complement and update the mapping done already in the 4th biennial assessment. Will also present to the committee the zero draft of this work stream as well. In tandem with this, we'll engage with public and private sector stakeholders using multiple avenues. First of all, since the submissions received so far are very less and the quality of information can be improved if we receive more submissions, that's why we agreed that we'll keep the submissions, we'll continue to consider the submissions we received. And we'll keep that channel open for in future as well. But then we have to put a stop at some date where we have to finalize the reports. So it is requested that to submit your views and submissions to us as soon as possible. Secondly, we'll be also engaging with investment banks and or like in other investment-related organizations in a virtual webinar setting later this month, and later on we have also planned a webinar with the financial ministries and central banks in later August or early September. This is where we are now, and over back to you. co-chair.
Thank you very much, Ali. That was very comprehensive, and we are looking forward, I'm sure, to these webinars. They promise to be very interesting. So thank you, and I'll give the floor now to Bianca for the issue for the product on the definitions of climate finance, the mandate and the approach taken by the SCF, and what activities you have planned. Bianca, please.
Thank you, Trode. Hello to everyone. I'm Bianca Moldovan, one of the newer members of the SCF, and I'll be working on this mandate with Diane, who unfortunately was unable to join this meeting. So let me give you a brief recap of the mandate for this work. In Glasgow, COP26 and CMA3 requested the SCF to continue its work on definitions of climate finance, taking into account the submissions received from parties on this matter, with a view to provide input for consideration at COP27 and CMA4. At SCF 27, it was agreed to take into account the previous submissions received in line with the mandate and to facilitate further perspectives on the matter through a call for inputs from parties and non-party stakeholders. So far, 7 additional responses to the call for input have been received to the 13, in addition to the 13 previous submissions which had been received during the course of 2020 from party and non-party stakeholders. These are all available on the SCF website. At the next SCF meeting later this month, the committee will consider the zero-order draft of the input on climate finance definitions, which includes a synthesis of all submissions since COP25, in addition to a review of operational definitions of climate finance used in reporting to the UNFCCC and by other institutions that collect climate finance data at international and national level. That is the update we have, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. If there are any clarification questions, we have time for 1 or 2, and then we move on. I see a hand raised here.
Hi, thank you for the report. You mentioned, I want to clarify, the call for inputs, did you take inputs from the non-state actors? So did you involve the constituencies? The other UNFCCC? Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
John will care. I have a question for Gabriela and also for Bianca. As you know, the $100 billion commitment entails that the climate finance should be new and additional, and I wonder how that would feature in your report about the goal. That's for Gabriela. And Bianca, I wonder if this issue of new and additional finance is part of the work you do on the definition.
Thank you very much for that question. So the goal itself does not make a reference to new and additional. And the mandate of the report on the progress report was given by COP26, and we will be guided by the mandate from COP26. That's probably not pleasing or a sufficient response to your question, but as a technical committee, we are driven by the mandates which were given to us by COP. Thank you.
In terms of what's captured in the definitions report, we do have, for example, a section that captures how finance has been discussed in the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and the relevant text, including on new and additional, I believe is included in that section. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca, again, and to you and Gabriela for answering the questions. And I'll now hand over to Vicky Nunes from Belgium to present us on the fourth BA.
Yeah, thank you. And so I have the honor to co-facilitate the fifth panel assessment, and it's the first time I'm doing this together with Diane Blacklane. Yeah, as you know, she couldn't be here, so this is why we're changing seats, because we are both co-facilitated with Diane. So yeah, just to give you a brief recap on the fifth panel assessment. As you all know, this is one of our flagship reports of the SCF to provide an overview on global climate finance. And this year, as I said, it is already the fifth one since it was first inception in 2014. At COP26, we welcomed the fourth BA and endorsed its key findings. And the COP welcomed the improved granularity of data in the fourth BA, as well as the mapping of the information relevant to Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement. The COP also welcomed the outline of the fifth biennial assessment agreed by the SCF. On the biennial assessment itself, so in 2022, it is of particular relevance due to the fifth biennial assessment is of particular relevance due to various linkages with other SCF mandates, and I think you all know which ones, of the Convention and the CMA, but also it goes beyond what we have been representing here. It's also relevant for the global stocktake, of course, in 2023, and the ad hoc work program on the new collective quantified goal. At SCF 27 in March 22, the committee discussed areas of potential improvements and coverage in the fifth biennial assessment, such as addressing data gaps in new technologies and on international and domestic climate finance, the concessionality of financial flows and issues related to debt vulnerability, and also measuring the impacts of climate finance flows and other topics such as risk management instruments, nature-based solutions, and gender and climate finance. Just as for the other product, a call for input was issued in April with a deadline of the end of July. With this call for input, we are particularly looking for evidence on the following. First of all, the methodological issues relevant to measuring, reporting, and verifying climate finance flows. Secondly, data on climate-relevant financial flows. And lastly, also the assessment of the effectiveness of climate finance flows, including drivers, impact results, meeting needs, and access. This call for input is accessible to all on the SCF website. Then at our next meeting, which is, well, next week, the SCF will consider the first order draft of the fifth biennial assessment. And as I mentioned, a call for evidence has been launched. So we are hoping to get a lot of input, as this is a very important report. And we will also hold outreach webinars in July and August with stakeholders on specific themes. So that's where we stand right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. We have had reports on our products for this year that have been mandated from Glasgow or are standing items. Following up on that, I would like to ask the four of you a question. And the question is, as one of the core functions of the SCF is to assist the COP in the measurement, reporting, and verification of support provided to developing country parties, how effectively can the outcomes under the current work streams fulfill this function? What is the contribution of these products? So who would like to start? Vicky? Thank you.
Yeah, it's always easier because I also have to repeat. And also, I think, the BA has, the biennial assessment, or I can say BA, right, has plenty of input to provide, especially on the MRV. I mean, our first chapter is completely about methodological issues, and as every year, or almost every final assessment, we have had recommendations to improve the MRV of aspects. I would say that that's a good contribution to this specific mandate of the SCF. Thanks.
Thank you. Ali?
Yeah, thank you very much. Building on what Vicky has already said, I do agree that that one of the core functions of SCF is the MRV of the support provided to the developing countries, but another function which is also very important and it's very recent is the assessment of the financial needs of the developing countries. And we did a very important work last year in the form of the needs determination report, because whatever we are monitoring or like evaluating, it should be compared with the actual needs of the developing countries. So in that context, there is always a need to highlight the importance of work SCF is doing in highlighting the financial needs of the developing countries. Another important work which will again further strengthen our understanding on the MRVs of support provided is the work which Bianca has reported on, the definitions of climate finance, or like definitions on climate finance. In terms of biennial assessment, we do have a working language where we, in SCF, we have an agreement that what can be counted as climate finance and what cannot be. But in general, we talk, there is actually no definition of climate finance. In the absence of the definition, it's hardly impossible to evaluate or do MRV in an efficient way. So this is the challenge which we are suffering from as a climate finance community, and hopefully this year we expect as a member of SCF even from all of us to further our understanding on and reach some sort of an agreement on the definitional aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriela, you want to come in?
Yes, sure. So I think through the lens of the 100 billion progress report, I would say there's clearly a strong additional element to the MRV, and we are hoping that we can derive elements from the report for the MRV. As highlighted by others, other products of the SCF have provided key findings, have provided recommendations, and so on. I don't want to preempt the outcome of the work we're doing, but at least Richard and I are aiming to also go in that direction with the 100 billion progress report. So we hope we will be able to provide you with key findings, recommendations, and things we can derive from the data and what's out there, the methodological aspects that Matthias was referring to, that help us as a collective to bring us forward in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Bianca like to come in? And if any of the other SCF members present here would also like to contribute, you're welcome. Bianca?
Apologies for the musical chairs, but such is the fun of events. I think Ale did much of my work for me, so thankfully I don't have that much to add. I do believe the update on the work of finance aggregators and providers, that will be a useful exercise, and it's a chance to have a bit deeper look. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to contribute to that question? No? So obviously the panelists said it all. And with that, I thank you all very much, and we can conclude this first informational session, and I hand over to the moderators for the next slot. That is Ambassador Mohammed and Vicky.
Well, we're getting new participants on the musical chairs. Just for your information, as mentioned earlier, these are just some of the work streams of the SCF. What the SCF will also be doing is holding a forum on finance for nature-based solutions this year. And this is being facilitated by Mohammed Nasser and Fiona Gilbert. They will also present detailed updates of preparations of the upcoming SCF meetings. And this is probably the SCF meeting will be happening on the 17th and the 18th. The SCF will also prepare the draft guidance to the operating entities of the financial mechanisms. This is one of the core mandates that has been given to the committee since its establishment. This work stream is led by Toro Sogio. Toro is in the room over there. And Ivan Zambrano. I don't know where Ivan is sitting, but he's in New York. Okay, so Ivan is in New York. With that just brief additional information, I would like to now invite the second panel, which will be moderated by Mohammed and Vicky, to take over. Vicky?
Thank you, and yes, of course, again, welcome. And we also would like to welcome the panel comprising members of constituted bodies. A well-known thanks to come forward. So I think it's mainly, we are having two colleagues from virtual participation, and then we have two joining here. So Frodo and Martin, feel free to come forward. I just briefly introduce the panel while they are taking their seats. First of all, from virtual, joining us virtually from Budapest, I would assume, is Ms. Kinga Santos. She is a tech member and has been so for quite a while, and she's with the Department of Climate Policy, the Ministry of National Development of Hungary. The next person is Frodo Nergart. He's a co-chair of the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism, and he has served at the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs for several years, including as a team leader at the Department for Environment and Sustainable Development, and currently as a chief advisor at the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Department of Green Diplomacy and Climate. Okay, and he has also held leadership roles at the World Bank, OECD, and GGI. So yeah, that's quite impressive. And also here in person is Marcin Kowalczyk, the senior expert on climate policy. He's been a member of the Polish delegation for climate change conferences since 2008. Was a member of Polish presidency team for COP14 in Poznan, COP19 Warsaw, and COP24 at Katowice, so also quite experienced. And there he also served as a lead expert overseeing negotiations and consulting parties on climate finance, but now works for the WWF in Poland as a senior expert on climate policy. And finally, Dr. Barbara Bushner, also joining us virtually from DC, so good morning. She is a global managing director of Climate Policy Initiative and is a lead author on CPI's Global Landscape of Climate Finance. Very important source of information for our all work at the Biennial Assessment. She also directs the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance and public-private initiatives that identifies cutting-edge climate finance instruments with the potential to drive investment at scale. So I think we have a very impressive panel, and I would leave it to moderator Ambassador Mohammed Nasser to lead us away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicky, and it's just Mo, so please stop this. Ambassador Mohammed Nasser is becoming like kind of difficult for me to cope with, so it's just Mo. Anybody call me Mo, or anybody knows me like Mohammed or Mo. So first, let me welcome the distinguished panel, and jumping quickly on the discussions and the questions, we would like to start by asking Ms. Kinga, what are the priorities of the tech in 2022? And how relevant is the work produced by the SCF to your work? And I hope that this really helps in steering the discussion. So, Ms. Kinga, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome everybody. I'm also jumping in here for the Tech Chair, Ambrosio Iovanolo. and I'm happy to present you the TEC's relevant work. The technology mechanism is promoting and facilitating the enhanced action on technology development and transfer in order to support the Paris Agreement. The TEC Rolling Work Plan for 2019 and 2022 is structured around 5 key themes of the technology framework, which are innovation, implementation, enabling environment and capacity building, collaboration and stakeholder engagement, and support. The main priority for the TEC this year is to implement the pending activities of its current rolling work plan and to initiate the preparation of its next rolling work plan for 2023 and 2026. The TEC is currently undertaking the following activities under the various key themes of the technology framework. Innovation, under innovation, we are working on exploring the setup of national systems of innovation in different countries and regions to analyze ways to incentivize innovation of mitigation and adaptation technologies. In implementation, we're working on update the TNA guidelines, building on previous work of the TEC with a view to TNAs leading to enhanced implementation. Under enabling environment and capacity building, we identify challenges and opportunities to strengthen enabling environments, including favorable market conditions, to enhance replicability and scalability of technologies for sustainable transport, including fostering public and private sector involvement. Under support, we undertake the analysis on the experiences, lessons learned, and good practices from the support for technology provided by the operating entities of the financial mechanism in collaboration with the JET, TCF, and the JET. The TEC also works closely with the implementation arm of the technology mechanism, the Climate Technology Center and Network, and undertakes joint activities on technology and NDC and gender and technology. With particular reference to the SCF work, the TEC appreciates the ongoing collaboration with the SCF in providing inputs to the draft guidance for the operating entities of the financial mechanism. The TEC has responded to annual invitation of the SCF to provide inputs with the draft guidance and will continue to do so with a view to enhance the coherence between the technology mechanism and the financial mechanism. The work currently undertaken by the TEC on analyzing experiences, lessons learned, and good practices from the support for technology provided by the operating entities will provide sound pieces for inputs for the guidance of the JET and the GCF. One of the functions of the TEC is to provide an overview of the technology needs and analysis of policy and technical issues related to the development of transparent technologies for mitigation and adaptation. In this context, the work undertaken by the SCF on the determination of needs of developing country parties related to the implementing of the Convention of Paris Agreement is particularly interesting to the TEC, especially regarding technology needs of the developing countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kinga. And I think, many elements of what you have mentioned really fits in the reports and the mandates and the deliverables of the SCF, including on the needs assessment and also on inputs to the guidance to the financial mechanism. And I think this has been a very good collaboration between the TEC and the SCF. Thank you so much. Let me move to Mr. Frodo, and here we are talking about the XCOM. We would like to know what are the priorities of the XCOM in 2022 and how relevant is the work produced by the SCF to your work. Of course, issues that relates to loss and damage are on top of the agenda in this discussion, and this SBs, they are of great importance to all parties and all stakeholders. So we would like also to hear if and how can the collective work of the committees assist in the identification and reporting of the loss and damage needs of developing countries and in better costing of those needs, if you can also touch upon that in your intervention. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me start by saying that I welcome this opportunity to engage with the Standing Committee on Finance, both personally but also obviously on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism. The current priorities of the EXCOM have been offering several linkages and options for collaboration with the SCF, which I'll try to highlight. First of all, two representatives from the SCF contribute to the expert group of the EXCOM on Action and Support, ASEC. With the support of these SCF members, the first written input to the draft guidance for the operating entity of the financial mechanism was provided by the group, and they were adopted at EXCOM 14 and then submitted to the SCF. In addition, and recognizing the urgency of enhancing mobilization of action and support to address loss and damage associated with the adverse effect of climate change, the ASEC engages technical experts and representatives on constituted bodies to work on supporting the strategic work stream of the current EXCOM 5-year rolling work plan to enhance cooperation and facilitation in relation to action and support, and this includes finance, technology, and capacity building. With the help of the two SCF members, the ASEC conducted a mapping of available sources of support, including the Green Climate Fund, at the national, regional, and global level for activities related to loss and damage, including a stocktake of previous analysis of available sources of support, possible gaps and challenges, and recommendations for improving this compilation. The work of the SCF, such as the assessment reports on the needs of developing country parties, or is it called the determination report, I believe it is, could inform the new 5-year rolling plan of the EXCOM, which we are working on now and to finalize before the end of the year, and thus help ensure that the work of the EXCOM may become more responsive to the needs and priorities of developing country parties. Another important work is the ongoing collaboration with the SBI to organize the Glasgow dialogue to discuss the funding arrangements for loss and damage. During these SB 56 sessions here in Bonn, the first Glasgow dialogue is being conducted, with the final session taking place tomorrow. The dialogue discusses existing funding arrangements for activities to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage. It looks at lessons learned to improve such arrangements, including barriers, challenges which countries are facing, and options for synergies and complementarities among these funding arrangements. A cross-expert group meeting of all 5 expert groups of the WIM EXCOM will take place at the margins of EXCOM 16, which we will be holding in the first week of July this year. And during this meeting, expert groups will be invited to suggest themes for the development of technical guides to help countries and stakeholders navigate towards relevant materials in the domain of the work streams of the Warsaw International Mechanism. These technical guides could provide another opportunity for collaboration with the SCF, especially within the sections considering available resources for support approaches to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage associated with the risk assessments of climate change impacts. The EXCOM thanks the SCF for this invitation, which helps to further foster collaboration between the two committees. This engagement is important for EXCOM's work, notably to enhance the understanding and availability of finance relevant to loss and damage. As demonstrated by Working Group 2 of the 6th Assessment Report of the IPCC, human-induced climate change is already causing losses and damages to both people and nature. The losses and damages escalate with every increment of global warming, and therefore our collaboration on financing aspects of loss and damage is becoming increasingly important. The ExCom looks forward to continuing and enhancing the work with the SCF. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to participate in this event today.
Thank you so much, Frodo, and thank you so much for the inputs. And I picked up a couple of elements there where the mapping of available sources, ExCom has done that. This is an important element in the discussions that are happening here, and also that the needs determination or assessment report is informing your new work plan of the ExCom. I think those are good ones. And again, as you mentioned, that we hope that during this year, leading to Sharm el-Sheikh, we'll be having or we'll be relying to a lot of the products of the ExCom to inform the discussion on loss and damage, which is one of the top agenda items that we are having in this SBN during this year. So thank you again for that. Next, I would turn to the think tanks. Marcin, as you would know, parties would like to have a report on the progress towards achieving the goal of mobilizing jointly 100 billion per year. From your perspective and experience, what have been the trends, the challenges, the lessons learned in tracking financial flows? This is one, and the second one, how can transparency be improved to assess the impacts of those flows in meaningful mitigation and adaptation, of course, projects, and as it is responding to the needs of developing countries? So, Marcin, you have the floor, and thank you in advance.
Thank you. Some of the issues that I would like to say here were already mentioned briefly by Gabriela when she was presenting on the 100 billion report. However, one of the issues, one of the challenges that are ahead of the report are, of course, the different sources of information, therefore different methodologies that may lead to different results on counting. Of course, different methodologies are connected with one important thing also mentioned before here. We don't have a common definition of climate finance. Without common definition of climate finance, it will be always contested whether the precise flow should be counted as climate finance or not. And this was something that will be affecting both this backward-looking and forward-looking part of the report. Also, we still run a risk of double counting, for example, sources from national reports, sources from MDB reports, and etc., etc. So there is a possibility that some of the flows will be counted twice. Although I know that there are people who are trying to heavily avoid that. One issue that was not mentioned but is very important, especially in forward-looking reporting, is exchange rates issue. We usually don't think about exchange rates issue. We are thinking that we're having to achieve $100 billion US. But essentially, all the countries that are trying to achieve this goal are using different currencies. The exchange rates are changing and shifting heavily during the years. And when we are looking at 2025, we don't know whether the 100 billion euro will be the same as $100 billion or half of it, or whatever will happen. Another issue. Yes, another issue in forward-looking, especially part of the report, is budgetary constraints, because budgets in different countries are programmed in different time frames. Several countries are using the yearly time frames. There are some, of course, institutions and countries that are using a longer budgetary time frames. But this is also something that will affect, especially whether we will see if in 2025 we'll have 100 billion or not. As for meaningful mitigation, it might be hard to assess it from sources we are having right now. We would have to look at this on the on the project level. The same goes for example, transparency. It's easy to get transparency on implementation on project level, but on an aggregated flows. And I believe that the report on such a big amount as 100 billion will have a lot of aggregated flows. It might be really, really harder. And there are, of course, non-public climate flows that will be taken into account. There might be a problem of proper attribution, whether the whether the flow is really climate and whether it's meaningful in its impact on climate. As for the transparency question and transparency challenges, in the future we might try to look at more granularity, but of course this might be a problem due to capacity also in some developed countries, because there are smaller developed countries for which making a report on the project level might be really challenging. They are not having that big staff, and this is also incurring the cost to them. That's one issue, but also there is an issue that will have faced similar constraints, and that's reporting on support received. This is the question of capacity for the developing countries that are not able to report on support received on projects that they are hosting. Sometimes it's even the question of whether the government of hosting country is aware of the projects that's happening on their soil. Then, if we would have the proper reporting on both support provided and received, there is a possibility of trying to match whether the inflows and outflows are matching each other. But again, this is something that could be challenging and that would require proper capacity and proper institution essentially to do this. And again, we're coming back to climate definition. In transparency, without this common climate definition, which will be a heavy political and heavily challenging endeavor, without the common definition, the results of such a transparency and such reports, also future reporting, will be heavily contested. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohsin, and thank you so much for this very frank assessment and response to the questions, and also for highlighting the challenges and the lessons learned. Some of them have been resonating in the discussions and the negotiating rooms. I'm sure colleagues who are negotiating finance are aware of, and I'm sure they will take it into their consideration when they discuss that and avoid this ambiguity on what they mean by meaningful mitigation. Meaningful, you need to do something about that. And I think on the issue of the budgeting cycle and programs, I think there was some sort of innovation in the report on the implementation plan of the 100 billion, where like an average would be taken across several years. So this gives kind of understanding that this is something that could be considered. But of course, this is in the consideration of the report and of the SCF. So thank you for that. And of course, the exchange rates, all those elements were in question. We heard many concerns in the rooms, and I'm sure that the report coming from the SCF will be taking all those elements in consideration, taking it forward. So thank you again. Last but not least, I have Dr. Barbara. One of the objectives of the Paris Agreement was making the finance flows consistent with a pathway towards the low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilience development. Well, Dr. Barbara, in your expert view, what is needed for the financial system to transition to be in line with the Paris Agreement objectives, be it the low emission pathways or the climate resilient development? And this is an important question because it will feed in also the report of the SCF moving on the 2.1c. So, Dr. Barbara, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure being with you, even though not in person. I'd obviously prefer that, but it's great to be part of this discussion here, and thanks so much for convening that. Yeah, so one of the things we are known for at Climate Policy Initiative at CPI is our annual global landscape of climate finance reports, which should provide really the most comprehensive overview of global climate-related primary investments. And year after year, we find that climate finance falls far short of our overall climate goals, and we are still really counting billions when the trillions are needed. But I think public resources cannot and should not be expected to fund the entire transition, and this is why mobilizing private capital is essential. Financial systems and the business community are really key of getting us where we need to go. So the financial sector is crucial from the power of directing its own assets and investments to its leverage in evaluating counterparties, or in other words, its clients and the assets in the portfolio. And this is actually the very tenet of Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement itself, so making really global finance flows consistent with the path towards net zero emissions and climate resilient development. And obviously this is a daunting effort. We require a whole system transformation of global finance and commerce systems from local action to global coordination, and which is why gatherings and discussions like this one are so important to this effort. So coming to what is needed for the financial system to transition to low or zero emission pathways, we at CPI, I think, believe that there's a few key ingredients which I'd love to share with you, and I'm calling them the 3 I's. The first I is integrity. I think what we see is, despite an accelerating pace of sustainability and net zero pronouncement and announcements by a range of actors, there is no universally accepted framework against which to measure commitments and progress towards true Paris alignment. And similarly, many institutions that have not made commitments are also not routinely identified and tracked. So in order for the financial system to transition with the necessary urgency and impact, we need to make sure that the total is equal to the sum of its parts. So in other words, tracking and analyzing the progress of the overall financial system, both public and private, separately and in aggregate commitments and progress. So just for your information, CPI, we are taking steps to address this, and we are particularly working 2 elements. One is a framework for sustainable finance integrity, which is the first guide to define necessary action across public and private financial sectors, really providing a universal set of sustainability guardrails across the financial system, building on all the various initiatives and coalitions that have been formed over the last couple of years. And in parallel, we have a second initiative, the Net Zero Finance Tracker, which really fills the need for a monitoring and accountability tool to track the financial sector's response to net zero and Paris alignment. But let me come to my second I, which is inclusivity, because we cannot adequately transition to a low or net emissions and a sustainable financial system unless we are truly inclusive. And this is not a nice-to-have sentiment, but a core economic principle of an interconnected global financial system with increasing shared risks. And inclusivity is really multi-layered. The financial system must adequately incorporate these shared risks that still are very much externalized. The assets, the investments, and revenue streams, both public and private, are all exposed at the moment. So the quicker we incorporate a more holistic view into our analysis and projections, more rapidly and equitable the transition will progress. But inclusivity is also needed at the geographic level, ensuring both global north and south perspectives are understood well and that competing priorities are accounted for when establishing any common rules or practices or goals. Inclusivity is also needed at the stakeholder, at the actor level, so we need to stop working in silos to ensure public and private actors' perspectives are incorporated, whether banks, insurers, asset managers, corporates, regulators, or policymakers. And inclusivity is needed to incorporate a broader set of social and environmental issues that impact financial systems. So addressing climate adaptation, biodiversity, nature, pollution, just transition, and the needs of developing economies will reinforce climate change goals and produce more durable and longer-lasting economic stability. And inclusivity also helps reveal different relative starting points, which brings me to the overarching point on capacity building. So to mainstream sustainability, we really need to build capacity and integrate incentives into all levels of our organizations, especially building internal capacity to understand and develop collaboration across the public and private sector, and increasing the array of instruments, of policies, and of other tools that are needed to accelerate the financial system transition. So in other words, inclusivity really means investing in humans, technical assistance for capacity building in local markets, and that's really from asset managers and fund managers to project developers. So as we increase our support in people, we will see also the pipeline develop, because none of these goals can be achieved without a significant increase in local capital mobilization. And this brings me to my last I, which is impact, because it all comes down to real economy actions that reduce emissions and develop climate resilience. So many actors in the financial sector operate at a number of steps away from real economy activities, either through portfolio allocation, stock or bond trading, or micro-prudential supervision that has little direct effect on real economy investment decisions. And while other actors like banks financing projects or corporations approving capital expenditure plans or governments announcing support incentives are really at the forefront of these transitions. And somewhat related point is that while climate, green or sustainable finance taxonomies can support identification of consistent activities, they may risk excluding necessary investment in high emission sectors or activities to support the transition to the pathway overall. So these may be in areas where consistent activities are not yet available, say due to technology innovations such as in the steel or in cement processes, or when financing is needed to wind down or responsibly manage retiring high emission activities whilst ensuring just transition of communities away from their reliance. And that obviously relates to, for example, the coal phase out policies or subsidies. So therefore, measuring the effective role of financial actors and their real economy impact and what metrics can or cannot be considered as indicators of success is really a crucial discussion point. But let me stop here. But again, to recap, we need the 3 I's, which is really integrity, inclusivity, and impact to ensure that our financial systems transition for a low or net emissions pathway. And let me hand back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barbara, for highlighting the 3 I's. I think I captured them correctly: integrity, inclusivity, and impact. Right? The voice here was not very clear. Excellent. And I think they resonate very much with what many have been discussing. And there, I would have a small question for you, which is simply, how can the SCF facilitate this shared understanding of the 2.1c? What do we mean by the 2.1c? The 3 I's that you have mentioned can help formulate the discussion and also help parties try to understand more what does 2.1c entail in moving things forward. I have a personal comment. Usually what I say is the financial institutions, the financial systems should also transform within, like parties and different stakeholders. The whole economy in the world is transforming into to be very climate sensitive, and I'm sure that in the operations and the policies of the international institutions and the different financial contributors, this kind of change is very much needed. But I'll stop there. I'm facilitating, so I have to be neutral, and as an incoming president, I have to be impartial. So it's really not helping, as I have to say. So that's it. And yeah, do you respond to my simple question of how can the SCF assist, please?
Sure, absolutely. And I did actually very much appreciate also your views here. But I think what we hear from you and from other panelists as well, also based on our own analysis, I think it's very clear that we just need better oversight to ensure that commitments are immediate, that they're credible, really resulting in meaningful progress, and that they're verifiable. So to combat greenwashing, which certainly is one of the things we've been trying to look into very closely over the last years. So we need to measure the financial sector's response to climate change by using a better set of indicators than we've done in the past. Indicators that really act as proxies of how organizations as a whole are responding to the various challenges at different levels, really from intentions set at the strategic level, so more that what's the goals, but through its progressive integration in day-to-day operations, so really how are goals operationalized, and the due diligence until the final downstream allocation into investment flows, so really how do basically goals translate into investments at the end. And then also, I think not new, but I think more important than ever is transparency. I think from public sector, from private sector and governments, it's just really critical for the global financial system to function. So there needs to be stronger focus on consistency in reporting to really understand whether we are making progress quickly enough. And I think in that context, the financial sector is highly regulated. Therefore it's accustomed culturally and also via institutional capacity in reporting material information publicly. And it should be using this institutional capacity to really ramp up its own net zero-related reporting and help guide requirements and processes for other sectors. But I think the other point I just wanted to make before handing back to you is that while a global approach is appreciated. We really need national level implementation of this approach. So we need to document practices adopted by different national actors to understand the effects of different actors. And this is really how they're influencing and contributing to the goals of Article 2.1c. So I think this is something where the UNFCCC obviously is very adept at. So really countries need to develop spacier and baseline indicators for tracking progress of different actors to show movement over time of the real-world outcomes of any actions towards making finance flows consistent over time. And for this, we just need guidance, toolkits, and capacity building. Again, this is something where the UNFCCC is just really important to provide additional guidance. And I think also, finally, if you're talking about systems level change, I think we need to stop thinking just about the individual actors and the silos in which they ordinarily operate. We just need to better coordinate across the silos of public and private sector and the many existing initiatives to foster integrity of net zero pledges and the overarching goals. So we need, again, leadership in its guidance and examples with which we educated the actors across the ecosystem to help operationalize climate and sustainability-aligned investment. So just to reiterate, I think we need not only consistency of financial flows, but also consistency in reporting. And in a nutshell, again, I think the Standing Committee could really help provide guidance and the platform to coordinate and exchange information. So with that, let me hand back to you. And again, apologies for not being there with you, but I do have a colleague of mine in the room, Sandra Gussman, so if there's any additional questions, I'm sure that she also can jump in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barbara, and thank you so much for the insights. And I see a lot of SCF members in the room, so they all heard you and heard your call. Oversight, of course, is something that the SCF would like to consider. Indicators is another element, I think, but I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that you brought to the discussion. Well, having said that, we finalized the list of speakers of the panel. I will just hand over to Vicky to manage the second part of the session.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, and thanks to all panelists as well. So congratulations, you made it to the final segment of today's side event, and we're very happy that you're still in this room. Now we're rewarding you with opening the floor for questions and comments. For SCF members and panelists joining virtually, please raise your virtual hands. And in response to the question, we would request all SCF members and panelists to contribute. And just to warn the SCF members in the room who haven't spoken yet, yes, I will find you, and you will be asked to respond as well. So yes, I'm opening the floor. Mo, are you serious? You wanted to get your first? Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you so much, and apologies. Not because I'm sitting here, I should not be asking questions. So, but in the course of this whole discussion, I didn't hear the word just transition. So, any of the panelists, any of the Standing Committee members, if they can share with us their view on how can this discussion or how can just transition fit in this discussion. We heard the 3 I's from Dr. Barbara. We heard the elements coming forward from Marcin, but we haven't heard this. How can we achieve that? Or how can we structure this kind of approach and transition within a just transition process? If there's an answer, please do. If not, then we'll listen to the rest of the questions from the floor.
You can respond to yourself. True.
Or put a question.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, so the floor is open to respond to this question, or if you have already other questions or comments, please feel free to take the floor.
We'll ask on the SCF members to ask questions.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Two requests.
Well, actually, I think it would be great if the stakeholders in the room would take the floor and ask questions or comments, since we will get plenty of time also still next week to have very in-depth discussions about this. And see, this is where we sometimes bat at each other, but not at you. Anyway, yeah, well, my personal take is that for me, just transition is part of the conversation around 2.1c. Of course, it says a low emission climate resilient development pathway. So clearly, the transition is embedded in that. And I mean, speaking, for example, for the case of Switzerland, for us, we're using a carbon levy, for example, in line with like redirecting financial flows in a certain direction and investments. And it's a levy, it's not a tax. So we're actually not keeping it for our own budget, but we redistribute it for reducing the health fare of our population. It's a social measure, which is quite interesting. So you're creating an incentive to redirect financial flows in the direction of a low emission development pathway. At the same time, you're redistributing the financial flows you gather, you redistribute to the population, especially the most vulnerable. So there's actually even a social aspect to it, which is quite interesting. And I think there are many examples like that that should be embedded in that conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate the question, Mo. And I think this is something that Ali and I are going to be thinking a lot about in the context of the 2.1c work. Similar to Gabby, I think my personal view on this is again, that just transition has to be a key element of the way that we think about 2.1c. I think to add some examples to the mix, in the US, one of the major things that's a priority for the Biden administration is environmental justice and making sure that we are recognizing that the differential impacts of climate change and the communities that are most vulnerable to those need to really be supported as we work on this transition and invest in making sure that our financial flows are shifted to climate smart activities. So to give a couple of examples of things that we're working on, we've been doing a lot of work in improving our building codes, for example, right? That's something that is a policy initiative that we can work on domestically, and that way when new construction is made, it is not only more environmentally friendly from a climate perspective, but it can also be more climate resilient, and that means that the least quality housing stock, who usually the most vulnerable communities have access to, will continue to improve, and it will benefit disproportionately those communities, and it provides an incentive for those actors, real estate developers, for example, in this case, to be shifting their financial flows towards more resilient construction activities. So that's just one small example of something that we're doing to improve our domestic enabling environment to help shift finance in the right direction by really creating the context that improves the demand for that sustainable investment. So yeah, completely agree with you there and really think this is a key part of the discussion. Thanks. Shraddha.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for that question. I thought it was a very interesting question. I wasn't really prepared for it, but happy to offer just some few thoughts on it. I think it relates both to the sort of the low carbon development pathway as well as the resilience pathway, if you will, or development. On the first one, coming from Denmark, we are transitioning. I mean, I think there are losers and winners. And in Denmark, we could look at our fossil fuel industry. I guess many countries will, and there will be losers among them. And in our case, our renewable energy industry is sort of boosting, and there are many winners there. And I think as that transition goes on, there will be people losing their jobs. There will be people who need training to requalify for other employment opportunities, and we must ensure that system works well, so people don't lose their jobs, and there will be, or if not social protection, then something that at least that helps that transition. The other one, I think, is the one on the resilience side, where we must ensure that our support reaches out to the marginalized groups, indigenous peoples, local communities. And I think that's a question of access. I think that also was just mentioned before. We must ensure that funding is accessible and it reaches out to the front line where it's most needed, and that we leave no one behind in that process. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'm getting whispers on what I need to say, apparently. Or any other questions? Also very welcome, of course. I was going to do the same with Fiona and Toru, but yeah. Any views from the SCF members in the room who haven't spoken yet? Or? Yeah, you can see it. Oh, they're looking mad at us. Yeah. So I think everybody's super happy with the work the SCF is doing, and just looking forward to our reports. And yeah, we should continue what we do then. Is that okay? And virtual questions or no? Okay, then I think we can wrap it up for today's SCF side event. And thank you all for joining us. And yeah, see you next time. And probably at COP27. Go ahead. Oh.
Thank you so much. Just one quick thing. Please fix your accommodation and everything. There is a booth up there. And as presidency, I have to always remind you, please do your accommodation. Looking forward to see you all in Sharm el-Sheikh. If you face any problem, just reach to anyone from the Egyptian team, including myself, if you face any challenges in accommodation or anything else related to logistics. See you all in Sharm el-Sheikh, inshallah.
People, as you're leaving out, I've been told that there are some copies of the BA and needs reports outside. So if you want to take a copy, you can grab one outside.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.